Thank you, Tony, and thank you everyone for joining us. Good afternoon. Exactly 1 year ago today, on 17th of March 2020, we held our first COVID-19 press briefing. I certainly did not expect that we would still be doing them in March 2021. COVID-19 continues to be a global tragedy, and what has happened in aviation over the past 12 months has been nothing less than catastrophic. Let me take you through a brief recap of the challenges and progress. First of all, demand fell through the floor. The scale of the decline completely dwarfed what has happened in 9/11, SARS, or the global financial crisis as you see on this chart. Second, this caused a deconnecting of the world. Before the crisis, we had almost 30,000 unique international routes between airports. Now, we have about 12,000, and the density of those connections has become much thinner. Before the crisis, the average route was served by about 43 flights per month. Now, it's out 20 flights per month, not even daily. The massive loss of connectivity depressed economies worldwide, essentially shutting down international tourism, conventions, exhibitions, and the like along with flying. 3, domestic travel did better. The number of routes being served is basically unchanged, but we went from an average of almost 90 flights per route per month to 66. Overall, in terms of passenger demand, we are back to 1998 levels, a 66% fall from pre-crisis levels. And in terms of passenger revenue, we ended 2020 at 1993 levels. Cargo, of course, was a different story. It returned to 2019 levels by January. What is being shipped has changed with the crisis, but people still rely on fast and efficient delivery of goods. And that is certainly true with the critical role that air cargo is playing when delivering vaccines. A viable air transport sector will be critical to energize the recovery. Governments realize that and have provided vital cash and other relief measures to preserve the sector during the pandemic, with direct cash infusions and through measures such as tax relief or loan guarantees. In total, it is valued at over $225 billion. The industry has done its homework to prepare for the eventual restart of operations. A recent poll of people who have traveled since June last year shows that 90% believe that the airlines have done a good job in enforcing health safety rules, and 86% reported that they felt safe while on board. As we showed last week, about 57% of travelers are ready to fly within a few months of the pandemic being contained. And we have very good news today with the first traveler using the IATA travel pass arriving in London from Singapore later this afternoon. Efficiently and securely handling health credentials, vaccine and testing certificates will be essential to an efficient restart. We believe that the IATA travel pass will play a major role in that, and this trial implementation is a major milestone on the way to the app release in April. In sum, there is light at the end of the very long tunnel. More and more people are being vaccinated. While we believe that vaccines will play an important role in opening borders, they are not a silver bullet. Testing will also play a role. That will ensure that those who cannot be or prefer not to be vaccinated will have an opportunity to travel. So, what will it take to get the industry restarted? There are a few issues that will need to be addressed. The first is replacing quarantine with testing and vaccination requirements. So long as governments maintain quarantine requirements, there will be no restart. With ample testing capacity, testing to travel is the first option. And with more and more people being vaccinated, there is a growing population that should be able to travel without restriction. One key element is still missing: secure digital standards for testing and vaccination certificates. We moved a step closer to this with the latest ICAO CART recommendations, which were announced on Friday. This should encourage governments to accept digital certificates, but we still need the global standards being worked on by WHO and OECD. With millions of vaccines already being distributed and the EU committed to its Green Pass, you could say this already is late in coming. The second is that governments must stay engaged. This crisis is not over. Normally, I would say that governments should set the rules and let airlines run the business. Fundamentally, that's still true, but we would have seen huge bankruptcies had governments not stepped up with over $225 billion of relief. I see at least two vital roles that governments must play. We will need continued relief measures, particularly those that do not increase the debt burden. Cost reduction will be a critical help, and eventually stimulus. We have already seen some plans by governments to subsidize tickets, routes, domestic journeys, etc. As part of the preparations to restart international travel, I urge governments to consider stimulus measures. We will also need planning. I have said this many times, but it bears repeating. We cannot restart this industry with the flip of a switch. It will require careful planning to take aircraft out of long-term storage, to ensure crew qualification, to recall laid-off employees, to reopen closed terminals, and so on. We can only be ready to energize the recovery from day one if governments have a plan and share it with us. The UK is the example to follow, and we are starting to see some similar activities in other key markets, but not enough. Before taking your questions, I have a couple of things to share. First, an announcement. Our Board of Governors took the decision to postpone the IATA AGM until the 3 to 5 October. And it will be still in Boston and hosted by JetBlue Airways. But we believe it's important to demonstrate that the value of meeting in person. And it appeared that our original dates in June could make that difficult. By October, we hope that borders will be sufficiently open together. This will be my last briefing. At the end of the month, I will hand over to my successor, Willie Walsh. I'm sure he will continue to make transparent and open media relations a priority of IATA. And the last point is to personally thank you for following IATA and this industry. Aviation is important. Economically, it's obvious. This last year has showed us what happens when people cannot fly. Millions of jobs depend on aviation. When we don't fly, they don't exist. And we have also seen the personal, emotional, and mental stress of being denied the freedom to fly. I appreciate you giving aviation the spotlight that it deserves. Please continue to follow aviation, even after the crisis ends. Aviation is the business of freedom. It provides amazing value to people, and long may that inspire great stories for you to cover. With that, I look forward to your questions. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexandre. So we have a few questions in the queue. Just a reminder to everyone that if you do have questions, please submit them via the chat function. The first question comes to us with respect to the European Green Pass. And the first part of the question asks, how optimistic are you that the green pass that Europe is planning will allow for a resumption of travel in time for the summer?
We are pretty optimistic that any measure that would help to reopen borders is positive. And we hope that the European pass will be easy to be integrated in our IATA travel pass to help to reopen the borders, to lift the travel restrictions, and to cancel quarantine measures. So I think it's a good initiative to help the restart of the industry before the summer season. So it should happen very, very quickly. It should be implemented very, very soon by all EU member states, and we should see something similar all around the world if it can help the reopening of air travel everywhere.
Okay. Alexandre, and maybe a follow-up to that. The questioner asks, do you think that if Europe is not able to act as a united grouping, will countries like Spain and Greece, which are more hungry for the tourist dollars, proceed on their own?
But as you know, opening borders or closing borders or implementing quarantine measures is a national sovereign decision. So adopting a system to ensure that air travel is safe and reopening borders, so adopting a system of quote-unquote health passport, vaccination certificate or test certificate is and imposing that as a mandatory requirement to enter into your territory is a sovereign decision by states. So if there is no common system applicable to the EU, each state will be able to do that on their own. So Greece in particular, but other EU member states could do the same if we are not able to achieve a common system for EU member states.
Thank you, Alexandre. We have a question that's, I guess, reflecting back over the last year. And the questioner asks, what was your darkest hour in this crisis?
My darkest hour was probably when I realized in the end of February, beginning of March, end of February, that the crisis will go much beyond the borders of China and Asia, will be a world crisis, that the order of magnitude of this crisis would probably be something that was unknown, and that we had to completely shift our way of thinking, of acting, of behaving, and move into a crisis mode, a crisis that even if I was slightly more optimistic that it wouldn't last too long, that would be a terrible one. So that was were my darkest hours. And at the same time, we saw the first measures taken by states that were appearing on our screens. What we have are the ITOP measures, that are signaling that there is a new requirement to enter into a territory, and we saw an enormous number of restrictive measures adopted at the beginning of March in a complete, uncollaborative and unilateral way by states everywhere in the world. So the globalized world that we knew disappeared in a fraction of week, of days, very quickly, and that was really difficult to admit.
Tony, you're muted.
Sorry about that. We have a question about opening of borders, and it references EU and US. How optimistic are you that something could be worked out between the EU and US in time for the summer travel season?
Pretty optimistic. I think that the EU and the US should find an agreement or a system, to allow passengers to travel, and a process, to check that air travel is safe, viewed from both sides. Before the summer season, probably in June, it will be active in June. We hope, and we are reasonably optimistic.
Okay, thank you. We have a question about health passports, and the questioner asks, why are there so many different passports or passports on the market? He notes that JetBlue has just announced that they're doing something that's unique as well. And the questioner asks, first off, can the industry not get united to work together? And secondly, are you concerned that this could add confusion to travelers?
We are concerned that if there are too many systems, applicable all over the world, because it will complexify the operations for airlines. It will, of course, complexify travel for passengers, which is very bad news. So we are not claiming to have a monopolistic situation with our IATA travel pass. Of course, we do not claim. We do not claim for that. There are other systems, but we are just advocating in favor of a reduced number of systems for simplicity reasons and also security reasons. Because otherwise, it would be difficult, to convince governments and passengers that having, thousands of different passport apps or whatever is a secure system to fly, to avoid reinfection and transporting the virus.
And Alexandre, I suppose that global standards for all to follow will be critical?
I think that global standard will be, because I think it will happen, and particularly with the contribution of OECD, could be a very good news. And then with this unique standard, you can have a certain number of digital system or digital app that could work with that standard. The point is that we should have a unique standard to fix the key features that this app or this system should comply with.
Okay, thank you. We have a personal reflection question, and the questioner asks, what, at a personal level, was your proudest moment in IATA?
Well, I had several, because this organization is a very effective, efficient. It's a kind of role model for any trade association and any industry association. So, first of all, the adoption of CORSIA, which is, of course, coming from everywhere in the world, but IATA has been instrumental in that. Secondly, the way we have convinced government during the crisis that this sector was so critical that they need to intervene massively, and they did. And the way we have anticipated many things during the crisis, that we prepared the restart already at the end of March 2020, so the restart of the industry. We have worked with ICAO very, very early to prepare that. We have asked for systematic testing already by the end of August, beginning of September. We are asking government for roadmaps and reopening plans consistent with our vaccination and testing strategy now for 5-6 weeks. So this anticipation capacity and what we said publicly about that has been critical, I think, and I'm very proud of that.
Okay, thank you, Alexandre. We have a question about your successor, and wondering, the questioner asked, what will be the biggest challenge facing Mr. Walsh as he takes up IATA going forward?
He's better placed to answer that question, but as viewed from my position now, I think it's to successfully and quickly restart this industry, and that's the short-term issue, and on the long run, to ensure that we maintain, develop, and consolidate our commitments towards sustainability and environment.
Okay. Over the last 4 or 5 years, you've been talking a lot about the business of freedom. Over the last year, the freedom to travel has been tremendously restricted. Are you concerned that as a result of this pandemic, part of that restriction or part of that freedom to travel might be lost permanently, that there will be ongoing impacts from the crisis?
It's a very good question, because this crisis illustrates perhaps better than I have ever thought of the fact that that aviation and air transport is the business of freedom. There is no better illustration than this crisis. Will the restrictions or the limitation be permanent? I don't think so. And when we have advocated in favor of implementing biosafety measures, systematic testing, vaccination and testing control processes or app, we have always said publicly, and governments with us have also said that these measures were built to be temporary. And I hope that it will remain temporary, and that we will be able in the near future, so when the pandemic will be considered under control, to release these measures and to be able to travel freely again.
Okay. And I guess a follow-up on that question would be, with people having not traveled for such a long period of time, do you think they will get in the habit of traveling less in the future, or do you think demand will return very quickly?
No, I think that the appetite to flight is there, and people will come back on our aircraft very, very quickly and strongly. Everybody I meet, I talk to, is eager to fly again. So I'm not worried. On the motivation, it's another story. As I have repeatedly said, the personal motivation for flying is very strong. Business travel will come back later, probably.
Okay, thank you, Alexandre. We have a question about other virus strains. So we ended up 2020 in a sort of optimistic note, thinking that borders would soon reopen, and we got hit by the new variants. Do you think that now governments have become sort of good at managing this risk, or accepting and managing this risk, or do you fear that new variants could see backsteps yet again?
It's a difficult question, because we haven't seen a significant improvement in the way governments are dealing with the new variants or new forms of disease, etc. The measures taken were unilaterally taken, no collaboration, no cooperation, no consultation. No major improvements. What we can hope is that, the vaccination will be able to address, the various forms of this virus and successfully. Otherwise, if there are some mutation that would resist or overcome the vaccine, I'm not sure that governments will find the appropriate policy or the most adapted policy. For the moment, I'm not totally optimistic about the way it is dealt with.
Thank you, Alexandre. We have a question about the cargo side of the business. So first off, it clearly has recovered much more quickly than the passenger side. How long do you think the vaccine distribution will provide an important support to international cargo business?
But the international cargo business has done very well, not on volumes, because the volumes dropped in 2020 by something like 8%, but more on prices due to the dramatic shortage in cargo capacity, because of the grounding of long-haul aircraft, passenger aircraft. So the cargo business itself has been the bright spot of our activity, particularly compared to passengers. And of course, the vaccine has helped, and the industry has been able, to demonstrate its ability, to distribute the vaccine in good conditions everywhere it was requested or asked to do. So the contribution of the industry in distributing the vaccine has been decisive.
Okay. We have a question about IATA's own cargo activities, and the questioner is asking, have we selected a new leader for the cargo side of the business?
How or if?
So have we found a replacement for the global head of cargo?
We are in the process of selecting him or her.
Excellent.
It will be pretty quickly.
Okay. Next question would be on the digital travel passes. Will they assist governments in not just the operational side, but also in their confidence at managing risk in this crisis?
For sure, the IATA Travel Pass, the success of the IATA Travel Pass is based on gaining confidence from governments and trust that the system of certification, of vaccination, of testing is absolutely reliable, and that they are sure, that governments are sure that people using this app comply with the travel requirements they have issued to enter into their territory. So it's absolutely critical to ensure that the government confidence and trust is effectively met for them to reopen their borders or to lift the quarantine measures or the travel restriction, whatever they are.
Okay. We have a question looking forward to the summer season. And the questioner is asking, how difficult is it going to be for the industry to pick the right balance in capacity to return to the market? Making sure that no business opportunities are lost, but also making sure that there's not too much on offer. How do you see that panning out?
It will be a difficult issue if governments are not able to design and publish a reopening plan in advance. As I told you in my remarks, we cannot restart this industry immediately without any plan, any perspective. It has to be organized. So the sooner we have the potential roadmaps or reopening plans in various countries the industry is serving, the sooner the better. If we have these plans too late, it will be difficult to adjust precisely and accordingly our capacity and our service.
Okay, thank you. Alexandre, you mentioned that the annual general meeting and World Air Transport Summit are being pushed to October. We have a couple of questions around that. So the first question is it right to assume that we expect borders to be open by then and free travel to a large extent restored? And second part of the question is, how committed are the IATA members to physically being at the AGM in October?
The answer to two questions is, for the first question, yes, we anticipate that borders will be open, or a significant number of countries will have reopened their borders, first of all. And secondly, our members are fully committed to physically be present, because it will be the sign that this industry has restarted and that we are on the safe side again and dynamic side again.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Latin America. So over the last 5 years, the Latin American market has obviously had some different changes, and it's struggled through the crisis, as have all regions of the world. But do you have any particular observations on Latin America over the last 5 years or in the crisis period?
I have 2 or 3 observations on the Latin American market. First of all, this market would need a kind of collaboration or unification to accelerate its development. It would be much simpler if there was a single safety authority, etc. We advocate in favor of that with the Latin American governments to try to build a more cooperative approach for the continent. Secondly, there are some parts of the continent in which operating an airline is expensive and difficult. So we have always said reduce costs, be more open in terms of traffic rights. So that's an important point. The third element is also for some countries, to reopen the traffic by lifting some constraints. I just mentioned, the block funds in Venezuela, for instance, that are very big blocking point for many airlines to serve the country. And apart from that, what is impressive in this continent is the dynamism of some airlines. And finally, last remark, we have been a bit disappointed by the lack of support from governments in this area, financial support for the airline. We have seen some, but not at the appropriate level, we think. It could have been even more active and more supportive for our industry.
Okay, thank you, Alexandre. We have a question about IATA's membership. So IATA's long talked about trying to be open and encouraging the recruitment of more low-cost carriers. Have you seen any improvement on that? And what is IATA doing to try and encourage them to join, assuming that's a priority?
First of all, we are encouraging them to join. We are welcoming them. They are more than welcome. And now some of them are board members. So they are very well treated and almost similarly to other members. Secondly, in terms of new membership, since I've joined IATA, we have seen a lot of low cost joining IATA, and almost all mid-size and small size low cost airlines are members, even now big ones. It's true that the 3 or 4 biggest low cost airlines are not members, but they know that they are more than welcome. And I hope that when they see what IATA is doing for the industry, that they are convinced that it is useful to be a part of our organization.
Okay. Returning to the crisis, we have a question which asks, are you concerned that we could end up with a stop-start approach to the industry restart? And do you think that there's sufficient planning available around that unpredictability?
I'm concerned about the lack of planning. We are advocating and pushing governments, to have reopening plans, roadmap to reopen their borders, lift travel restriction, and help us, also to plan our own restart. But for the moment, only the UK has paved the way and published a reopening plan. So we are asking government to follow the UK examples, and my concern is there. That the reason why we are pushing hard and we are very vocal in asking government for a consistent planning in advance of the reopening.
Okay, thank you. We have a question as to what travelers can expect in the restart. Particularly, do you expect that they will enjoy some good deals on tickets, prices, robust competition to try and win them back?
It's not totally easy. You have contradictory issues there, because on one hand you have less you have routes that are not served as well as they were, so an offer that has been significantly reduced, and it pushes prices up. On the other hand, you have a very weak demand for various reasons that everybody knows, that pushes prices down. The airlines, they need desperately some passengers, so they are doing a lot of efforts of promotion to reduce the airfares. All in all, I think that the prices should remain stable, but shouldn't move significantly, neither higher or lower.
Okay, thank you. We have a question about vaccines, and particularly vaccine equity. So are you concerned that governments could make vaccination a condition for travel? And what will that mean for countries where vaccination distribution, for example, is not as robust in other countries as in other countries?
We are concerned that vaccination could become mandatory to enter into a country, because, as you know, we are not recommending that. We are not recommending that vaccination is mandatory, and we are recommending that there is a combination of various elements: vaccination, testing, etc. So if vaccination is a mandatory requirement, we are pretty concerned, not only for the country in which vaccine distribution of vaccine is not at the right level. Of course, for this country, it's an area of concern, but it's an area of concern for all the people who cannot or do not want to be vaccinated.
Okay, thank you, Alexandre. We have a question which refers back to your comments that governments are not coordinating sufficiently. What do you attribute that lack of coordination to? What's the reason for it? And what exactly do governments need to do better?
But I would recommend that they collaborate more in the institutions that are designed to welcome and to accommodate this collaboration, whether it's WHO, IATA, UN agencies, OECD, whatever. But there are some international framework that have been designed, to organize this collaboration and to deal with that. And I think that government should do that. It can be also the EU or whatever organization. But frankly, one of the outcome of this crisis is that fragmentation has significantly replaced the previous world that was based on globalization, and that's not a good news, not only for our industry, but for the world in general.
Okay, thank you. We have just a couple of questions left. So one question asks about the importance of sustainability in aviation's agenda. Has that fallen lower on the agenda in the crisis, or are airlines seeing that as a critical part of the recovery?
No, it's a critical issue. We have maintained our commitments unchanged, and we are still working, and we are still working on enhancing or improving or reinforcing, the targets and the commitments this industry is taking in terms of sustainability. So it is still a number one issue on our agenda. Unchanged.
Great. Thank you very much, Alexandre. And then this will be the last question for today. And I should say that we've had it many, many times in the queue, but I was saving it for the last. Alexandre, people are curious as to what the next steps are for you.
I was say, if I could tell you, I would, but I cannot. It's not totally clear.
Okay.
Totally defined yet. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Alexandre. And then maybe just a last question would be, the media have been a great help to us in this crisis in getting the message out about the industry's state. Do you have any sort of comments on that, or?
The only comment, and thank you for your help. It's absolutely critical that the message we are putting together, we are trying to convey, are based on on our collaboration and on the media you are working for. It's a key issue for us. It's a key issue for the industry to have your support, and because it explains to everyone, governments, public opinion, decision makers, how important this industry is, and what has to be done to restart and revive this critical element of our freedom. And thank you for that. Thank you for all the medias and journalists that have contributed to that, to our action. It's critical.
Great. Much appreciated, Alexandre. And then I should just let you know that we've also had lots of comments in the chat function thanking you for your openness and your transparency and your leadership in the crisis. So know that that's been appreciated by the journalists.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. So with that, we'll close this briefing. We'll not be doing one next week or the week after. So we'll likely return after the Easter period. So thank you, everybody, once again.